Hey guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. This character highlight video is about Jacen Solo, one of the more prominent expanded universe characters. As always, the video will be broken down into 3 sections. First, I'll give you a brief story synopsis and overview of this character. Second, we'll talk about his personality traits as well as his Jedi powers. At the end, I'll give you my personal impression of this character and what I hope to see in the future. As always, guys, thank you so much for all of your support. If you enjoy my character highlight videos, please consider subbing to the channel. That definitely helps me out. Anyway, let's get into it. So, both Jacen and Jaina Solo were the twin siblings coming from the marriage of Leia Organa and Han Solo. The characters were originally created for Timothy Zahn's original Thrawn trilogy, written in the early 90s. Of course, those are now considered Star Wars legends. We know that from childhood, Jacen and Jaina were pretty troubled young kids. Why? Because there were a lot of kidnapping attempts. A lot of the forces, the Imperial remnants, were after Leia Organa specifically. We know that in that time period, after the Empire's fall, after the second Death Star has been destroyed and the Emperor is no more, this enigmatic character, Admiral Thrawn, arrives from the unknown regions of space, and he's after the Imperial throne world, after Coruscant. He wants to reclaim it, and in an effort to do that, he goes to this hidden location and looking at the Emperor Palpatine's secret vault located on Mount Tannis. And of course, there he discovers one of the Emperor's evil Jedi clones called Joruus C'baoth. And this evil Force sensitive, he knows that in his desire to possess both Luke and Leia as his potential evil students, he also senses that Leia is pregnant with the twins, and he desperately wants to get them because he's power hungry, he's this deranged, crazy, evil Jedi, and he wants new trainees. We know that when both twins, Jaina and Jacen, reach 13 years of age, both of them go to a Yavin 4 academy, which Luke Skywalker establishes on the planet, on the moon. And this is the first Jedi Praxium where Luke starts going around the galaxy collecting the potential students, and that's where he trains them. So both siblings go there and they train with Luke Skywalker. There, they also befriend a lot of different friends, which become also prominent characters through the expanded universe, including Chewie's own nephew, Lobaka, a Wookiee Jedi, as well as this very interesting character who will become very important in this discussion, a princess from Hapis cluster called Tenel Ka Jaw. She's half Hapan woman, and she's half Dathomiri from the planet of Dathomir. We know that in early interactions with this young girl, Jacen experiences a very tragic accident during their training. Both are very young and eager students, and they're fencing with the training lightsabers, but Tenel Ka's attention slips, and Jacen is very eager to prove to her that he's just as capable, and Tenel Ka's arm is severed. And it causes a rift between the friendships, and they kind of have to spend a couple of days separate from each other. But then Jacen, of course, approaches her and is able to say, "I'm sorry, and I feel very bad for what happened." And Tenel Ka also reminds him that it wasn't entirely his fault, that her attention slipped, and she was too egotistical and trying to prove her own powers, and this was the cause of it. Anyway, at the end of this incident, they still become friends, and they grow into one another as the time passes by. Later on, in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, we have these intergalactic invaders, the Yuuzhan Vong. They come from a completely different galaxy, and they try to completely dominate and invade that one. And during that time, which is a strife for the whole galaxy, and you see the Yuuzhan Vong attacking planet system by planet system, slowly making their way to the Coruscant, Jacen becomes sort of a philosopher. He struggled using the violence against his opponents because he wasn't unsure how exactly the Jedi are supposed to use the Force, especially in light of this very challenging and trying times. At one point, he thought, well, if we are the Jedi, we have the power, we have the knowledge, we should use it to defend the weak. But his younger sibling, Anakin Skywalker, who's also the younger son of Leia and Han Solo, Anakin had a much more benevolent approach. He said that we should never use the Force selfishly. We should only use it in the defense, even if there's a raging war around us. There was a lot of conflicts of interest between the older and younger siblings. Jacen joins as a part of this special strike force assembled from the younger Jedi trainees, where all of the 3 Solo children are involved: Jaina, Jacen, and their younger brother Anakin. And they need to go to this planet Merkur to destroy these new bioengineered hounds that the Yuuzhan Vong created. And they're called the Voxen. And what they do is these special animals, these feral beasts, they go after Force-sensitive the Jedi and they eliminate them. So the younger Jedi are assembled and they convince Luke Skywalker and their parents that they need to go to this planet and eliminate the Voxen Quinn and get rid of this problem. During that time, some very pivotal, tragic events happen that affect Jacen in a very meaningful way, but he's also captured by the enemy. He stays with the Yuuzhan Vong for a full year, and he's actually tortured at their bioengineered kind of like contraption called the Embrace of Pain. And what it does is the Yuuzhan Vong are these aliens who grow their technology, actually. Everything is biologically created. Their weapons, their armor, their ships are actually grown, and they despise everything technological. But they also admire strength and nobility in combat, and they also believe that through pain, people gain wisdom and spiritual knowledge, and they actually mutilate themselves. It's part of their customs. And they also test this teenager, Jacen Solo, through torturing for a full year, just trying to find out and see what kind of person he is. Is he somebody that is worthy of their admiration? And during that time also, he is being very carefully, methodically brainwashed by this mysterious Vergiri, this bird-like creature, very small, and we don't exactly know her motivations, but we know that she used to be one of the Jedi Order who escaped at one point, which there's actually another Star Wars Expanded Universe books, which kind of goes a little bit into more detail on her past. But anyway, this Vergiri character gives a very unorthodox and different points of view on the Force, trying to convince Jacen Solo that, hey, the Jedi are kind of not entirely right, and don't get me wrong, neither were the Sith. You need a more united, balanced view of the Force. You're supposed to embrace all sides of it if you are going to have any realistic chance of defeating the Yuuzhan Vong. So at the end of the war, Jacen Solo helps defeat the Supreme Overlord Shimra, and he even at one point attains the unity in the Force, so he becomes a very powerful Jedi even as a teenager. So 5 years after this Yuuzhan War ends, Jacen Solo is once again at a loss. He's not entirely sure how is the Force employed by the Jedi. Is Luke Skywalker's teaching the right path for the future of the Jedi? So Jacen sets off on this pilgrimage, and he goes around the galaxy learning from various Force-using sects and cults. Any kind of knowledge, any information that is available out there that exists outside of orthodox Jedi teachings, he tries to get a grasp on it. And at the same time, Jacen also is haunted by this very dark vision of the impending future. Something very desperate and very dark is supposed to happen. And he always sees that silhouette, this shadowy figure, this perhaps a Sith Lord, somebody coming. And he feels it is his imperative to try and stop this guy because he can't fully relate this information to his family. He's not quite willing to communicate with them at this point. After he returns from his pilgrimage, he begins to have the secret relationship with Tenel Ka Jo, his friend from the Yavin 4 Academy that we mentioned early on, whose hand he severed through accident. They become romantically involved and they marry each other. Excuse me, guys. And as a result of that romance, they have a secret wedding, and Jacen has a newborn daughter, Alana, and she's hidden for a while from his parents. You know, Han and Leia, they don't even know they have a granddaughter. He tries to keep her a secret. And something significant begins to happen to Jacen Solo. He begins to change. He becomes desperate to protect his daughter and his wife from any future wars, from any future struggle that he has witnessed in this absolutely devastating Yuuzhan Vong war. And he begins to be tempted by the dark side. You know, he has all these negative feelings and emotions that he's telling because it's inescapable to him. He remembers his grandfather's past. He remembers the legacy of Anakin Skywalker, but at the same time, he can't help it. He's pretty much trapped in the very similar scenario. This, of course, creates a rift with both Skywalker and Solo families, with his mother's side and his uncle Luke Skywalker, because he has ideological differences with Luke and the way that the future generations of the Jedi should be trained. So at one point, Jacen takes up a more militant approach with dealing any political dissidents or any kind of cultural strife that is happening on the planet Coruscant, which is still healing from this devastating war. When Luke Skywalker's and Mara Jade's son, Ben Skywalker, is born and he grows up in the aftermath of the Yuuzhan Vong War, Jacen sort of takes him under the wing, and he also starts influencing his younger cousin against Luke Skywalker's wishes, because Luke understands that his younger son is also an early teen. He is very eager and he doesn't know where he belongs. So he doesn't fully approve of his older nephew's Jacen's tactics, and he's not fully approving of this relationship. In the Star Wars Legacy series of books, we even see a darker turn of events where Jacen Solo basically organizes this police task force, which kind of oversees all the troubled parts of Coruscant, and he enlists his cousin's Ben Skywalker's help. He says, like, look, you need to be out there in the front lines and help me quell all of the unrest, which raises a lot of deeper questions. Guys, I'm not going to go into the full story of Jacen Solo. I think it would be much more interesting if you check it out yourselves and see the full extent of how deep this character goes. Suffice to say that Jacen's anxiety makes him, and his loneliness actually, makes him spiral down more and more and closer to the dark side of the Force. And from that, there's other major events that happen in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, which I'm not willing to talk about or spoil for you guys because it will actually ruin a lot of interesting part of this character. But trust me, guys, that both Jacen and Jaina Solo work very interestingly in the future consequent Star Wars books. Let's turn the page now and talk about his personality traits as well as his Jedi powers. From early childhood, we know in the Young Jedi Knights series by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Muesta that Jacen Solo is a very charismatic young man. He's sometimes awkward with words, not just around girls, but even around his friends. But he tries to alleviate this situation and be a joker and a prankster with Jaina and with his dear friend Tenel Ka. We know that he has affinity and huge like for animals, even as a small boy. As a matter of fact, on his Praxim Academy at Yavin 4, in his personal dormitory room, he actually has his menagerie of different animals. That he collects different pets around the Yavin 4 forest, and he brings them in. He learns how to communicate with them. And there's actually a couple of funny, really cool episodes in those younger reader books there that I really, really enjoyed. Also, he has an inkling to be this kind of old soul. Even as a kid, he has this philosopher's mind, and he tries to see how Luke Skywalker conducts himself with other students, and he tries to emulate that. But he also has deeper questions on life itself, as a teenager, but also about the Force and how it's to be used. Early in the Yuuzhan Vong War, he engages in a couple of these, philosophical debates with his younger sibling, Anakin Solo, and where Anakin believed that Force is something that should be in service of everybody, and that the Jedi are supposed to use it only as a last measure and only for defense. Jason started embracing the idea that you should use the Force for yourself to achieve inner harmony, and you shouldn't just project it outwardly just in service of others. That you as a Jedi user should understand the Force fully and act from that point. You should first center yourself and then use the Force as you see fit. So after Jacen was caught by the Yuuzhan Vong and tortured, his mentorship with this very strange creature that I mentioned, Vergiri, he becomes a more serious and more sober young man. He becomes more secluded, removed from Luke Skywalker and the rest of the Jedi. And once again, he has that anxiety, and he becomes selfish in the way that he desperately wants to protect Tenel Ka and his daughter Alana, even from the threats that are not even there yet. Once again, kind of mirroring the situation with Anakin Skywalker, who has always had a vision that his wife will die in childbirth, and he wanted to prevent that, even though it didn't happen yet. Same with Jacen Solo. He sees this shadowy figure, this Sith Lord, or whoever that might be, that is coming into this galaxy, and he just doesn't know how to approach the situation, and it created a lot of anxiety for him. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about his Jedi powers. We know that as a kid, he had attunement in the Force with animals, and he was able to communicate and control them. As an adult, as I said, he went on this pilgrimage, and he tried to pick up any Force lore or Force techniques or abilities that are unknown to the Jedi from all the Force-sensitive cults and sects around the galaxy. And before he does that, before he goes on a pilgrimage, one thing is also worth mentioning. As far as his combat prowess goes and his lightsaber abilities, even as a kid studying under Luke on the Yavin 4 Praxium, he was immediately considered one of the best lightsaber fighters out there. So he was very strong there. And even though as a kid, he had difficulty mastering the levitation technique, because he fully committed himself to the practice, and once the Yuuzhan Vong War hits, he completely masters that ability as well. So something that was problematic for him early on in childhood, he was able to overcome even that and become a master of levitation as well. He also very often uses force speed, which we see in the beginning of the Phantom Menace, when both Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi are able to escape the droidekas, which is pretty cool, and he uses it quite liberally. He's also able to defend himself in the Jedi fencing techniques. At one point, there's a certain incident that happens. I'm not going to spoil much, but he has to battle a Jedi, a battle master, Kyle Katarn, who is once again one of the most revered characters in the expanded universe, and he's also one of the Luke's closest friends and one of the most powerful Jedi that ever lived in the expanded universe. And younger Jacen Solo is able to fully hold himself almost on par with this very experienced Jedi, which is no small feat. Jacen was also able to dispel any Force illusions. When they go after hunting this evil Jedi called Lumia, he's able to dispel her illusions. And it is known that Jacen Solo, you know how you're supposed to use the Force on the weak-minded? Well, Jacen became so proficient with mind control that he could even manipulate and influence other Jedi students and Jedi Knights. And not necessarily maybe fully control them, but sort of, spread his ambition or spread his feelings or emotions on them, and sort of kind of get other people to be more agreeable with him. As a mature Jedi Knight and a seeker who goes around the galaxy looking for the Force lore, he starts picking up on esoteric Force abilities. For example, he learns this Ang-Ti ability, which is to teleport objects through the Force. Aha, surprise. We sort of see that in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Remember what happens with the Han's dice? How Luke Skywalker was able to take that and bring it to Leia momentarily. Of course, later on, poof, it disappears. But also when Kylo Ren sits in the same room with Rey, and they have the little exchange, they touch hands, and then when Kylo Ren disappears, Rey's hand is moist, which meaning that basically he was able to have a little bit of those raindrops, and it comes her way. They're transporting objects through the Force, which is an ability we see that Jacen was able to master. Another extremely powerful esoteric technique, which is a little bit kind of a big question mark. I know that a lot of fans were not in favor of that particular technique, which we saw in the new Jedi Order book series, but Jacen learns flow walking, which is one of the most bizarre but also equally interesting techniques, which basically Jacen is able to project his consciousness into the past or the future, but never to alter the events, only to observe and to see what has happened. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's been years since I read it, but there's one instance where he does flow walking and he observes one or two Jedi, and in the real time, with the scene that he's observing, that the Jedi are in that moment, they are actually able to sense that there is another Force presence near them. But obviously, of course, I don't think they recognize that it is Jacen, but they actually sense that somebody's interrupting the natural events of things, and there's another presence there. So I thought it was pretty cool. I personally enjoyed it. I'm all for bizarre uses of the Force as long as they're not fully explained to us. If you break it down to the midichlorians kind of like, a scientific explanation, I'm not on board with that. So floor walking worked for me. Jacen also picks up this Dathomiri ability, which is to basically kindle a globe of light, to give himself illumination in dark places. It's a very Dungeons and Dragons kind of like traditional magic kind of ability. For those of you guys who play a lot of video games, played a lot of role-playing games, right, like Skyrim or something, poof, you have just like a ball of light, and Jacen is able to do that through the Force. Again, it's a little bit on the ridiculous side, but I felt it was pretty interesting. And the last thing I wanted to mention, which I thought was pretty cool, which is not necessarily shows your power in the Force, but it's still pretty damn useful. He's able to manipulate sound. Jacen could project his voice at great distances, which you could imagine becomes very useful sometimes at certain specific points. But he's also able to listen in on conversations from a very long distance, which sort of comes into play during Jacen's later years when he changes and he becomes sort of a different person in a way. So that was very interesting as well. So after reading the Young Jedi Knights series, which I still have to complete, after reading the entire New Jedi Order, the entire Legacy series, what was my impression of Jacen Solo? I enjoyed both Jacen and Jaina in original Throne trilogy. I thought it was quite interesting that Leia would have twins who become Jedi, which is kind of similar to Luke and Leia, but so what? I mean, it's a recurring theme, but they're very, very different personalities than Luke and Leia. So I enjoyed that. And I loved how Jacen and Jaina also had separate personalities from one another. They were kind of different people. That I enjoyed that Jacen was this very boyish and very mischievous young man. He was a prankster and he loved animals. Something very different and interesting. And I also loved his relationship with Tenel Ka. First of all, she was a striking character. She was a beautiful female lead who becomes even more prominent in the future books. But right from the beginning in the new Young Jedi Knight series, I really enjoyed that. She was very self-assertive and very confident woman, very interesting. And I loved the friendship that they had. And I also enjoyed that very tragic incident that they had, because it was such a teachable moment for both of them that, her hand is severed and Tenel Ka actually decides not to get an implant. Her arm stays like that. You can actually see in one of the artworks for the Star Wars Legacy books where she's standing there, she doesn't have an arm. She said, that's a reminder of the ego that I used to have. I'm not ever going to replace that arm. But because of that, both were able to grow past their differences and even, sparked a romantic relationship with one another. So it was very, very enjoyable for me. I also liked Jacen's interaction with Jaina and his cousin Ben Solo, and obviously his younger brother Anakin Solo, which once again created a very interesting contrast between the new generation of the Jedi, Solos and Skywalkers, who are all very different from one another. And it was quite cool to see a young person who challenged Luke Skywalker's methods and his teaching ways and say, well, maybe we shouldn't use the Force this way. Maybe we should go that route. I was like, oh, wow, a young man is doing that, but in a way that is not necessarily always just for the sake of protest and just being a rebellious young man, but he also brought a lot of valid points, which I found interesting. And lastly, what I'm going to say is that the last part of the character that is known to me so far, Jacen's gradual spiraling down and becoming a more depressed and darker and brooding thoughts, and his turmoiled soul, how the visions of the dark future and how his willingness to protect his family and the aftermath, all of that stuff, I felt was extremely well done, because it stretches across many, many books, and it's so well fleshed out that I didn't feel that anything was rushed. It was a very natural evolution of the character. So what are my hopes in the future with Jacen Solo? First, I think there is no reason that we can't have a non-canon representation of the character, right? If we had something like Visions animated anthology on Disney Plus, we could also have potentially a story which they literally extract from Star Wars Expanded Universe and give us an episode about Luke, Leia Organa, and Han Solo having Jedi twins. Like, why not? That would be pretty interesting. It's not the real story that you want to tell with your canon, but it would be more of a what-if story. I would be very interested to see that. But more than that, what I would really want is, guys, I started a petition last year to reprint the 14-book series of the Young Jedi Knights by Kevin J. Anderson and his wife, Rebecca Westa. I'll drop the link in the video description below. If you're interested, go check it out. Sign the petition. It only takes like 2 minutes. I really feel that it would be of great interest to modern audience today. Those books were actually out of print long before Disney acquired Star Wars. I believe by somewhere like 2009, 2010, these books were pretty damn hard to get. They were just actually out of print. I don't know why they would never renew the licensing for those, because they were extremely popular in the late 90s, early 2000s when those books were coming out. Fans were on top of them, man. Even like I was adult already at that time, and I was enjoying the heck out of those books. So that would be my biggest ask. If they could bring back Jacen Solo via these Young Jedi Knight books, man, I would be really interested in that. And last but not least, I'm not the rumor type of guy. I don't like to speculate, but there's a lot of ideas going around the Star Wars fandom that the upcoming Ahsoka show may try to play around with the Star Wars timelines and actually creates parallel universes the way that we see in DC Comics and Marvel Comics, how you have like different versions of events happening and taking place. I mean, if that happens, why not show us in Ahsoka that, hey, look, there's all these possibilities of different stories that we could tell with Star Wars, and this one show opens up the floodgates. Well, that would be a perfect opportunity to say, because at one point, Kevin J. Anderson actually petitioned with Lucasfilm to try to create a television series based on his Young Jedi Knights series. Oh, man, if they actually bring that up to Disney Plus and say, hey, if we can now experience stories that don't take place in Star Wars canon, or if indeed we have parallel universes, I'm going to take a chapter from Star Wars Expanded Universe, books that a lot of fans really cherished and love and talk about to this day, and we're going to bring it via a Disney Plus show and show you those characters that way. So I think this way you would please the older crowd like myself, but also give a chance to a new generation of Star Wars fans to experience something wonderful from the past. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for checking out this character highlight. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you're interested in signing that petition of the books that I'm working on, check out in the video description below, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care, everyone.